Hi, it's Fraser here, Deputy Editor of Spiked. Before we get into this week's episode of the Brendan O'Neill Show, I just wanted to let you know about a very exciting event that Spiked is hosting. On the 27th of February, Spiked will be celebrating our 25th birthday. And to mark the occasion, we'll be hosting a party in central London for all of the people who make our work possible. That's the Spiked team, various contributors, friends of Spiked, and crucially, our supporters. People like you who donate to us every month and allow us to keep doing what we do. If you're a Spike supporter, a member of our online donor community, you can get your early bird tickets to our event now. But there are only very limited spaces available, so if you want to join us, please do not delay. To find out more, you can go to the Supporters Hub on our website by logging in, or check your emails because you should have received an invite in your inbox. I hope to see you there. Now, on with the show.
Hello, welcome back to the Brendan O'Neill Show with me, Brendan O'Neill, and my special guest this week, Moira Deeming. Moira, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. We've wanted you on for some time, so I'm really happy that we were able to make this happen. And there's a lot I want to ask you about, but I think we should probably start by just, if you don't mind, because I know you've done this a million times before, but just to ask you to outline a bit about your story for our listeners. Many listeners will be familiar that you are the ousted Victorian Liberal in Australia, and that the reason you were ousted and the reason you've had a lot of ups and downs over the past couple of years is because you scandalously believe in biological sex and women's rights, and you are critical of the trans ideology. And that has landed you in a lot of hot water, even with the Liberal Party, which to some listeners might think that's the more sensible party in Australia, but it seems that might not be the case. So I want to ask you about all of that, but if you could just start by explaining to us what happened, when did this start, and why did it give rise to so much controversy for you?
I think the controversy was that I think the understanding, my understanding and the understanding of, it seems, everybody looking on, was that the real issue was actually that I do believe that biological sex is an important concept to protect in law for obvious safeguarding reasons and for women to participate fully and freely and comfortably in public life. And yet what happened was the leadership team at the time, who has now been replaced, and I've actually been readmitted to the party room, so there's a great happy ending. But at the time, I was accused of having knowingly associated with Nazis and associates of Nazis. And those associates, the people that I was associating with that were supposed to be either Nazis or associates of Nazis themselves, was Kelly J. Keane, and just, a single mum of four, a feminist with her own sort of following in Australia who has Jewish heritage. And it just seemed like a political hit. But in my mind, there was no excuse for smearing me with anything like Nazism whatsoever at all. There was no basis for it. And then we went through this saga where I tried to get a retraction and it just never came. And so we had to go all the way through to the federal court, where I won 5 out of 5 of all my publications that I put in as defamatory. I won on every single publication, and every single one of Mr. Pisido's defences failed. And that's what I needed. I needed to be exonerated. And then after that, ironically, there was a vote to have me reinstated, and he voted against that. And in fact, there was a tie. And so he used his casting vote as leader to vote against it to keep me out again. And I think that was probably the last straw for the public, because it was just outrageously unjustifiable. And anyway, and so then there were moves afoot. This was right over Christmas, so my kids didn't really have much of a Christmas. But, new alliances were formed in that group. A new leader was chosen, Brad Batten, and they brought me back in. And so now I'm in. There's a by-election on, and we're back to work. But, this is just exactly the kind of cancel culture that happens to everybody. And I think the reason that my story just has taken hold in people's hearts and minds in the public is that there haven't been many wins, especially in Victoria. And this is happening to everybody, or they're just self-silencing. And usually when this kind of thing happens, the innocent people don't win. They do lose their licenses. They do lose their jobs. They are cast out of society. And from my perspective, it would have almost been wiser for them. I wouldn't have been quite so dementedly angry if they had perhaps just done a plain political coup. But because they smeared me with Nazism, which was going to roll over onto my children's futures. There was just no negotiating with me on that. It had to be retracted. There was no middle ground. It was untrue. And there was no middle ground for the former leader either. And so a judge had to adjudicate it, but I won. And because I was innocent, I think that was just a real boon for people, because it's been a long, horrible few years in Victoria. We've had, Daniel Andrews is known for being Dictator Dan, keeping us in these lockdowns. We've just had a terrible time in Victoria. And I just think it's been a really wonderful thing for everyone. I've had people in all political parties, members from all political parties, write to me and say how happy they are.
Yeah, yours is a kind of cancel culture story with a difference, as you say, because it has a happy ending. And John Prosciutto, the then leader of the Victorian Liberal Party, who is the person who defamed you with the Nazi slur, and we can come on to that defamation suit in a moment. You won that. You won that case, and then you also, as you say, won readmittance to the party room in the Victorian Liberal Party. So you're a victim of cancel culture who came through, and I can really see how that would hearten people in Australia and also people around the world. But if you don't mind, let's just talk a little bit about when it wasn't so nice for you, and talk a bit about what happened and why it happened. So a lot of listeners will know that this begins in March 2023, when Kellie J. Keane, also known as Posey Parker, she's been on this pod many times. We're fans of Kellie J. She's great. And she was doing a tour of Australia and a tour of New Zealand. Many people will remember the scenes from New Zealand when she was set upon by a mob of feral misogynists, really horrific scenes. But she also was in Australia, and she was in Melbourne, and that's where you joined her. And a bunch of Nazis turned up and were doing Hitler salutes, and somehow the women who had gathered there simply to defend women's rights got lumped in with those far-right idiots, and it was really atrocious. But let's just talk a bit about that day and what happened. So what compelled you to go to that event? What made you think, I need to go to this? I need to show solidarity with the women who are there and with Kellie J. Keane. What was it that motivated you to take part in that?
Well, my whole entire journey into politics was spawned by this issue. Otherwise, I would be very happy in my life at home as a wife and a teacher and a mother to my 4 children. But I came upon these laws and policies whereupon all the child safeguards were removed. Every effort I had ever fought for and that everybody knew were right and good boundaries with children to protect them, they had been removed. And on the basis of transgender ideology. In the beginning, like most people, I thought, I think they must be talking about intersex people. That's very sad. I don't know what to do about that. They can do whatever they need to do, those poor people, Although, of course, I've evolved on that now that I've seen a person with an intersex condition who is a male with an intersex condition punch young girls in the face. So, but in terms of, in the beginning, I was very soft on it. But then as I came to realise that it was just an absolutely no holds barred, completely untethered opinion, basically, that overrode every common sense safeguard ever, I realised I actually couldn't do my job as a teacher anymore. I wasn't going to be able to say no to the male teacher saying that he's a female, coming into my change rooms with my girls on swimming carnival day, and they wouldn't want him in there, and I wouldn't let him in there, and I'd lose my job, and they'd be called bigots, and they'd have to go to some kind of stupid training or something. And it was just unacceptable to me that this was the law. I think I was completely red-pilled. That absolutely ruined my trust in government, because there is no excuse for removing child safeguards. We all know what they are. We've had royal inquiry commissions, apologies for what happens to children 10 years later. And here we are removing safeguard. It was just an absolute absurdity, and it was non-negotiable to me as a mother, and having been a victim in the past. That was it. That was it. Nobody was doing their job. I needed to do it myself. And so, look, that drove me into politics. And one of the very first people that I ever started learning from on this issue was Kellie J. Keane. She's long been a hero of mine. There's lots of other women and feminists who do lots of work, but, I was at home with babies, and we weren't watching university lecturers and university debates, but we did see Kellie J. Keane get up there and argue, why was anyone pretending like they didn't know the truth? And so, it was important to me. I really wanted to meet her. I'd been a huge fan. I still am. And because I'm there to help change those laws, as well as, just getting fair governance. But that is absolutely that. I wouldn't have been an MP. I wouldn't have dragged myself all the way into Parliament because there are potholes in the road. As much as I feel sorry for people, my passion is teaching. I love kids, and it is all about child safeguarding for me. So that's why I wanted to go. That's why I wanted to help. And I wanted, whatever I can do to help, I just wanted to help in this area.
This episode of The Brendan O'Neill Show is sponsored by Proton Mail. One of my New Year's resolutions was to finally get on top of my emails. That's why I recently switched to using Proton Mail, the world's largest secure email service. Proton's number one priority is user privacy and security, so I know my personal data is safe with them. Its end-to-end encryption means the only people who read my messages or see my attachments are me and the person I'm sending them to. This way, I know that no one is snooping around in my emails. Not even Proton can read them. If, like me, you're sick of your inbox getting clogged up by spam, then Proton is definitely for you. Its FishGuard mechanism detects and blocks phishing attempts, so any scams are filtered out before they even get to you. One of the best things about Proton Mail is that there are no ads cluttering up your screen. This makes using Proton Mail a slick, clean experience, but it also means my data is safe from companies that might want to sell it to advertisers. Proton Mail is a brand I can really trust. It prioritizes free speech, transparency, and internet privacy. Plus, it's based in Switzerland, so it operates under ultra-strong Swiss privacy laws. Since switching to Proton Mail, I know that my data is being kept safe by people who really care about my privacy. So take back control of your inbox today. Go to proton.me/Brendan O'Neill or click the link in the description to switch to Proton Mail and receive a 38% discount. That's proton.me/Brendan O'Neill to experience true email privacy. And what was the atmosphere like at that event? Listeners will know about Let Women Speak events because we have a lot of them in the UK. They often meet in Hyde Park, and Kelly J has taken them to other parts of the UK as well, and also to other parts of the world. So it was one of those events that you were on. There were quite a few women there, all standing up for women's rights, biological reality, and the safeguarding of children. What was the atmosphere there like? What were your thoughts then when these blokes turned up and some of them were doing the kind of Hail Hitler? What was that like?
Yeah, well, news reports make it sound like they came and stood with us and they mingled with us, but that's not what happened. There were 6 or I think it might have been 8 different groups there on the day. We were worried about counter-protesters, so the trans activists. We were very worried in case they were violent. They're terrifying. They really are terrifying. They were making, rape and death threats. They were throwing stuff at us. We knew they'd come and do something to the microphone. Anyway, these men in black, I didn't see them at first. Someone told me that there are men in black masks somewhere. So my memory is like a little bit hazy because I found that stressful. I was very worried about violence. So I had a cloudy memory of the day. But watching the footage back, I can see why I had no memory of seeing those men at first. Is because they were behind this big square pole on Parliament steps, and we were all facing away from them, listening to our speakers when they did what I thought was the first salute. So first of all, I didn't even see that salute. And they'd done another one sometime before that, before they even got near us. The first salute I saw them do was when they were walking out. So the first thing that we all thought was that they were Antifa, that they'd broken through the lines, that they were the trans activists. But they didn't come and attack us. They sort of were talking to the police and nobody knew what was going on. And they didn't actually have any Nazi insignia. So until I saw that last Nazi salute, I didn't really have a category for those men. I didn't know what they were doing. The sign was horrible. It said something like, destroy pedo freaks or something. And so it had I couldn't connect that with Nazism. It wasn't connected to us. I don't know. They were just this weird blob of black masks and black shorts, dressed like Antifa, but in shorts, all by themselves with their own speaker. I don't know. It was just very surreal. I remember them being marched out and seeing a salute at that stage, but they were leaving. Again, I didn't really think anything of it except wow, I can't believe I just saw a Nazi salute outside of a history book because I taught history. I remember feeling that was so surreal. What did I just see? And then that was it. Never in a million years would we have thought anyone would connect them with us. First of all, it's a bunch of men with their own microphone over 15 meters away from us. No one was looking at them. They didn't talk to us. They didn't come near us. There was one photo of one of our women who must have worked out that they were idiots. and stood in front of them to mock them. She's very famously got like a unicorn horn on. But other than that, there's not a single piece of footage or a shot where we're even anywhere near them. There's some other people talking to them, but again, that was a different protest. And the accusation was that they came and supported us, but then it turned out there was another rally called Protect the Children rally, and they stood behind those people's sign. And that like their sign, Destroy Pedo Freaks, which I don't support killing anybody, but like that did match up with something called Protect the Children because it was specifically about children. Anyway, everything was lost in the media storm. The worst thing from my perspective, that other than the threats of violence, other than sort of all the bullying, but the worst public media consequence of what was said about me by the leadership and what happened to me out of the whole entire saga was the Q&A episode, which you wrote an article about, which meant so much to me at the time. Honestly, I found that that was the most horrendous public degradation, and it was so sexist. And it was our ABC, our national broadcaster, taxpayer funded. They had all these men lined up talking about me, about whether an adult can just go around in public saying her opinions. He called me a doll and told me to go to bed, and then they sort of mocked my status as a rape victim. It was just the most vile, horrendous thing I'd ever seen, and they didn't invite me on. And so, look, lots of terrible things happened, and obviously it ripped apart my family. My kids were mistreated. I had people stalking me. It was just absolutely horrendous. People dropped off. They didn't want to be seen with us. They, in quiet circles, they said, it was really bad what happened, but obviously we can't be sending photos with you, obviously. As an MP, I had people withdraw invitations and say, look, you can't come to our rugby club until you get those accusations cleared because, all of the parents are going to freak out that we've got a Nazi here. Those are the kinds of things that people said to me. It was so degrading and so humiliating and exhausting. It was just such an injustice, and I was never going to stop until I got justice.
Yeah. I think I remember the Q&A episode that you're referring to, where I wrote about it in the Australian newspaper, where there was the non-binary activist. He said, as you just said there, he said directly to you, just stay at home, doll. Why do you have to go to protest? Why do you have to go to gatherings like this? Stay at home, doll. Stay in bed. I just thought it was one of the most misogynistic things I've heard on TV in modern times. Stay in the kitchen. Be a good girl and stay at home. It was horrendous. But in my piece, I said this is proof that trans activism is essentially misogyny in drag. If a man puts on a dress, he can be as misogynistic as he wants. That's the lesson of recent years. You talked there about what happened to you when you guys got to be associated with the Nazis in this very cynical fashion. So some in the media class and in the political class for them, it was like manna from heaven that these blokes turned up, because then they could say, see, we told you these women are really secretly quite fascistic. So there was that real smearing of you, that real slurring of you, and it led to actual disinvitations and threats. So it was a very uncomfortable atmosphere for you, and Kelly J. Keane suffered similarly as well, especially when she went to New Zealand. Were you surprised by the smearing that came your way? I mean, in some ways, I guess it's quite expected because women who speak out on this issue get a lot of flack. But were you surprised by the intensity of it?
What I was surprised about was that it came from my own side, that it was put on Liberal Party letterhead, one of the only two major parties in this country. It was put on that Liberal letterhead with the Liberal logo and all of the authority and the moral weight of that organisation, and it was put in writing and then followed up with interviews. I just couldn't get over it. It wasn't, a Twitter troll. It wasn't, a left-wing MP like they always do, saying their stupid Nazi nonsense, the left wing, with their ridiculous insults, the far left, nobody takes them seriously, obviously, because they've discredited themselves because they're absurd. You just can't even take them seriously anymore. But for it to come from my own leadership, to be done so officially in that capacity, that was just going to ruin the rest of my life. And it was going to ruin Angela Jones's life. And, Kelly J. Keane, she hadn't suffered violence like she suffered in New Zealand. New Zealand was straight after the Melbourne rally. And the intensity of that period, oh my goodness. That was one of the first moments where I really had a bit of a breakdown, was when I saw that footage. And I just thought, this is, I I really had that feeling like nobody cares about women. I was raised in sort of a feminist matriarchy, believe it or not, but I never believed in like a patriarchy. I didn't. I thought that was ridiculous. I'd never suffered and had any less opportunities than anybody else because, all the feminists had done all the work. It was done now. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. But then when I saw these things happening and nobody get out, well, not enough people, not people in power, not people in the mainstream media. I knew there were lots of people and there was lots of support on the ground. But it was terrifying. It was just terrifying that violence was just tolerated. I mean, you should see some people in the political parties right now, rightfully so, emoting all over the place about the anti-Semitism everywhere. And I support that, right? I do. It is outrageous. But that was not there when women were being threatened and when I was being threatened. My children were threatened with gang rape. Like, it was just silence.
I think, yeah. And, it always struck me that when we all saw those scenes of Kelly J. Keane in New Zealand she feared for her life. She was surrounded by a mob and if they had got to her, they would have harmed her severely. That was clearly the aim. And you just realize how dangerous demonization can be, because it's so obvious that when she was in Australia, she and you and others were referred to essentially as Nazis and scumbags and even worse words than that. And you just build up this idea that these women are a threat to the trans community and a threat to society more broadly. It effectively invites threats and it invites assault. And that's kind of what happened to you.
Yeah, and what I thought happened at the time was that because these accusations were made by such a legitimate person, so a person who was the alternative premier with the authority and the stamp and the seal of one of the most prestigious political parties in this country, when that was made public, when those documents came out, what I thought was, you've just made us fair game. Like, nobody pays attention to the Nazi slur that much, or at least it's starting to lose its power now, I suppose. It's terrible. It does have power. It does. But for it to have been so official, it was like it gave people an ethical and moral excuse in their own heads to do whatever they wanted to us, which was terrifying.
Yeah. I think that's exactly the relationship between those official denunciations and then the more kind of physical violence that you see on the streets. So let's talk a bit about where those denunciations of you came from. So you've said that for you, one of the worst things is that they came from your own side. They came from the Liberal Party, and they came from John Prosciutto in particular, who was at that point the leader of the Victorian Liberal Party. I almost couldn't believe it when you were ousted from the party room and you were pushed aside. To myself, I was thinking, well, this is the end of the Liberal Party, because if the Liberal Party cannot tolerate the inclusion of a woman who merely stands up for biological truth and women's rights and children's safety, then it's finished as a party. And so John Prosciutto made comments about you and you felt compelled to take court action. And there was a defamation case, which also had a happy resolution at the end of 2024, when the judge found that John Prosciutto had defamed you by implying that you were a Nazi or had links with Nazis. How big a decision was it on your part to take the party leader to court or to go through with this case? Because I imagine that's not a decision one takes lightly, but you must have felt compelled to take some quite strong action here.
I had no choice if he wasn't going to just voluntarily admit that it wasn't true and retract what he said. He clearly wanted me out of the party. He didn't want me as part of a team that he led. He kept on saying that. And so, but I just thought, that's nice if you want to ruin my political career. I then need to go on and have some kind of a career where I can work to feed my children and pay my mortgage, which you have just, with the nature of your political attack, destroyed. So you are now in the way. Not only have you smeared my family name, which will go on to my children, which I will never, ever rest until that is wiped away. But on top of that, I had literally no choice. I was not going to be able to get a job. It was very clear to me immediately that I would never work again. Like, it was so clear, like within a week, 2 weeks. I just thought, wow, nobody will come near me. And I also wanted to say that in the Liberal Party, so the people who helped me the most, there was lots of people from everywhere, all parties and all kinds of places, but there were so many good people in the Liberal Party. There really were. And it was a line in the sand moment, but this was just so astronomically disproportionate and such an astronomically catastrophic political own goal for their brand, even for their whole entire Liberal Party brand. But absolutely nobody could persuade Mr. Pizzuto to back down from it. He did have lots of opportunities to come out of it. I did make offers. I did try and save face for him in many ways. And none of that came out properly in the court case or even afterwards. But it came out at one moment when everybody realised that I had offered for him to get out of it with no words, no apology, nothing, just an acceptance that what I said, that my claims were true. I think it was $100,000 or $99,000 or something, and costs. That's it. And I didn't tell anybody that because it was confidential. I don't know how that got out. I don't know if that was in the court case or not. I think it was in the court case. I don't know. But the point is it came out and then everyone was like, oh, so it wasn't Moira being the aggressor. It wasn't Moira being unreasonable. And that was the other thing that happened to me. The whole entire time I was telling journalists the truth in the background. I would show them text messages. I would give them evidence. I would give them evidence to show them that what they were telling me they were going to write was a lie. And they said, if you're not going to go on the record, Moira, I'm not including it. And then they would put in their articles an absolutely outrageous lie that I had just disproved. And they would say, a senior Liberal source said. And I actually got grumpy with one of the journalists who I quite like. I was like, that is not fair that you're putting a senior Liberal source, and I've just disproven that to you. You know it's a lie. You know that senior Liberal source is lying to you, and you're still going to just print the allegation that a senior Liberal source made, but you won't put in something that you've seen and just say it's some worthless Liberal source, whatever you need to call me. Like my word was worth nothing. John Pizzuto's word was worth everything. It wasn't just a man versus a woman. It was a powerful person versus powerless person. He had a 20-year background and career. The three former premiers of our party all backed him. So I didn't mean to go up against the party machine, but that's what was sort of turned against me. I remember thinking early on, and it was sort of like a bit, self-pitying, but I was standing in Parliament on the crossbench. It was when I was first, did my walk of shame over to the crossbench. And it was really humiliating. And so I was looking around and it was like I was in the middle of an amphitheatre, like in the Roman Colosseum, and I had Labor abusing me and I had my own Liberal Party, like they were abusing me. The media were abusing me. The Twitter sphere was going berserk. There was just abuse everywhere. And the political party machines, Labor and Liberal and Greens and the media, everything, all the power structures in the state were just, it felt like they were all laser focused on this one woman, just one little woman. And I was like, why do you hate me so much? But in the end, people did rally around me. I got lots of donations. People were unbelievably generous. People inside the party put their reputations and their standing in the party on the line to defend me. And so it wasn't all bad. It wasn't all bad. And it's good that we won. This is a fight that every political party is having, as we know, all around the world, right? It's happening in Labor in the UK. It's happening in the Conservatives. It's happening in every party all around the world. There's people from Greens parties in a few countries that have written to me, sympathising and just being so lovely because, they don't agree with it. They know that it's happening in their country. So we know that this is a fight that has to be had. And at the end of the day, I think deep down everybody knows the outcome, if they've ever met a mother, seriously, the outcome is going to be, you will give us back our child safeguards, you will give us back our sex-based rights, and then we will move on and fight about something else. But this will not stand. They will never win. They're not going to be able to keep this.
Hi, it's Lauren Smith here, the producer of The Brendan O'Neill Show. I just want to let you all know that Spike's internship programme is now open for applications. We're looking for an aspiring journalist to join our team on a 6-month paid full-time placement. You'd be working with us at the Spiked office in London, helping us with all our output, including articles, blogs, videos and podcasts like this one. You don't need any prior experience to apply, but if you have worked in journalism before, or you know your way around video, audio and social media management, then do make this clear in your application. Above all, we're looking for someone who has a passion for our pro-freedom, pro-human politics, someone who's hardworking, dedicated and willing to learn on the job, and someone who's got a good eye for a story and a flair for journalism. Everything else you can learn on the job. I started at Spiked as an intern, so I can highly recommend applying for this. It's an amazing experience and you get to earn while doing something you love. There really is nowhere better to kickstart your career in journalism. To find out more and to apply, go to spiked-online.com/interns. That's spiked-online.com/interns. You have until Sunday the 23rd of February to apply. Good luck.
Yeah, it's like, that's a really good point, really important point. And, when you see scenes like you being surrounded by politicians and all of them feeling that hatred for you, aside from the ones who supported you, of course. Or, when you see the scenes of Kelly J. Keane being pelted with tomato soup and having things thrown at her, or scenes around the world, in fact, of women gathering to express their rights and being attacked. It's hard not to think of the old witch hunts. It's hard not to think of those, the Salem witch trials where women dragged into the public square and humiliated and so on. It does have that echo to it. But I wanted to ask you, I think you're absolutely right that your case, the happy resolution to your case, I think will be inspiring to lots of people in Australia and beyond Australia. But I did want to ask you a bit more broadly about how bad things have got in Australia. So I know there are a number of cases going on in relation to the trans ideology. There's a couple that we're familiar with here. There's the Sal Grover case, the Tickle versus Giggle. We've had Sal on the pod to talk about that, where it seems she's not allowed to have a women-only app. She has to allow men to be involved if they claim to be women. It's an outrageous case. There's also, this week, there was the Lesbian Action Group in Victoria, in the state of Victoria where you are, who have been told that they are not allowed to exclude trans women, i.e. men. So this is a lesbian group that wants to have meetings with other lesbians, and they're told that they have to allow men to join, which is extraordinary. So there are things happening in Australia which are quite scary and quite worrying. So even though your case ended in a good way, there are still lots of problems there, aren't there?
Yeah, well, my case dealt with defamation, and John Pesutto never has admitted that what I believe the real reason was, which is this issue, which meant he was left with smearing me as, a Nazi of some description. And so I got him on defamation. And even though that's a win, the whole goal, the whole entire reason that I dragged myself out of my lovely life with my children and my students and my lovely suburban life, which I adore, was to change these laws. And so we haven't taken any ground, actually, but I think it's good for encouragement and inspiring people, and just sort of breaking people out of that lull, because they're saying, I get people saying things to me like, but don't you think the horse has bolted? And I was like, I don't care if the horse has bolted. I don't care how big the task is. The task must be completed. There's no point whinging about the size of the task. We just need to get it done. We need to, stop moaning and just work out how it's got to get done legislatively. And so these cases, like the Lesbian Action Group, that was great that they challenged that. It was great that they went through with that, because it proves what the Labor government had been lying about. When I was on council and these laws sort of first came out, I said to them, can you please put it in writing that these toilet signs, they all mean the same thing, male, female and gender neutral. I said, they all mean exactly the same thing. And I want you to admit that in writing so that we can put a sign up, because women are going to be completely wrong-footed when they see a man come in and then they say, excuse me, you can't be in here. And it's them that has broken the law. I said, you need to tell people that if that's what you've done to the law, I live in a democracy. I'm going to campaign against it, obviously, but you should admit that that's what you've done. And you should let me put that on a sign so that everybody knows what their rights are and are not. And they wouldn't admit it. They would never admit it. They would never put it into writing. But cases like that force the truth out into the public square. Tickle versus Giggle, same thing. Because people can't be in denial anymore. That is the law. They actually literally took away our identity in the law. They actually quite literally took out child safeguarding. Can you believe we live in a time where they have removed child safeguards and predators can just get a million times closer to them than ever before without anyone being able to say, mate, back off?
And there are some, you used the phrase earlier, about being red-pilled, and I think a lot of people are having red pill experiences at the moment. And I think in the UK, it's the trans child issue. I'm doing air quotes around that. The fact that children were being put on puberty blockers without any sense that they were safe or had any good use. Those drugs have severe consequences and have ruined lots of young people's lives. I think the Lesbian Action Group case in Victoria will red pill a lot of people as well, because people will just say, hold on, why can't lesbians have their own space? I mean, that's a very basic thing to request in terms of freedom of association and sexual freedom and so on. So I think these cases will pique a lot of people and they will start to ask questions. But I wanted to ask you, because you've had a lot of animosity over the past couple of years, and lots of other women have on this issue as well. What do you think drives the particular anger that trans activists feel and express? Because even within our cancel culture climate, and we do live in a quite unforgiving climate, although things might be changing, but even given the cancel culture climate of the past few years, which was always quite ferocious, the trans activism seemed to be the most ferocious thing of all. I mean, death threats, misogynistic abuse, J.K. Rowling is being hauled over the coals every single day on the internet. I mean, women really got it in the neck on this issue in particular. What do you think drove that particular animosity on this question?
I think it's different things for different people. So I think there's a cohort of people that misunderstand what people are objecting to when they object to transgender ideology. They think it's the same kind of thing as objecting to consenting homosexual adult relationships, and it's not. They think, okay, well, then they're talking about intersex people, and those poor intersex people, they can't change who they are. And it's like, it's not about that. It's not a biological medical condition. If it was, and they could prove it, I'd say, give me the test. Don't you dare chop off any children's body parts without being able to prove that in a blood test. What is wrong with you? Children change their minds all the time. Just the nature of what a child is has been slowly eroded so that people who want to safeguard children are being reframed as oppressors. And I just think, well, then what does that make predators? I would like to know, if I am not allowed to block predatory behaviour so that, I don't know, children are free to express themselves, what is it? What is your plan for predators? Because as far as I can see, you're leaving them completely exposed, and that is absolutely inexcusable. The medical aspect of it is just, a nightmare. Obviously, you would have read about John Money and everything. So I think, so there's just people who think it's just, they believe the nonsense about, it's just the far right who hate gay people. It's like, this isn't even about gay people. In fact, gay people are the ones who are possibly the biggest victims, twice over in some cases, and children. But parents' rights, you think about it, I've always framed this in terms of parents' rights initially, because as a teacher I was required to lie to parents about their children living as a different gender, and it struck me that when I looked at the policies, they would say, they would describe the parents as unsafe, so they can't know because they're not safe to be told. And I was thinking, if a parent is unsafe, why are we sending the children home to those parents every night? Either they are unsafe and we need to report them to child services and have them investigated and have those children taken into care, or they are safe and we have no right to lie to them, and this is obscene and we are totally outside of our legitimate authority. And secondly, oh my goodness, God have mercy on anybody who lied to me about my children at school. I will decimate that whole institution, burn it to the ground. Like, how dare they? Who do they think they are? Outrageous. So parental rights, just like this encroachment of the state in such an obscene, predatory way that harms children, it's just, I knew that was going to tip people over the edge. So I think in terms of, and then there's just this weird male sexuality, this entitlement, so there's obviously people with gender dysphoria, there's people who don't like their bodies, you read about the gay men and these girls who would have just been lesbians, and like, they've had their bodies ruined. They're not predators. Oh, your heart breaks for them. Truly it does. Like, because those things are irreversible. This isn't about self-expression. It's about catastrophic errors with lifelong consequences. They don't want to admit to that when they're just exploring. And I'm like, there's reasons why you don't explore, off the edge of a cliff, because you die, you can't just explore everything. And then there's obviously this bunch of predators who have been given the seal of approval, given that green light, like, when we were called Nazis, we had a target on our back and it was green lit by all the official institutions in the world, basically all around the world, the same thing's happening. And so all these predators who have been, we've all been told are these poor victims, and they behave like violent predators. They make threats. And it's like, to save their own face, these political institutions and everything are just trying to whitewash it and ignore it. And I just think, well, then you have no credibility anymore. Because, like, people always whinge to me about being a Christian, like, oh, what about the Catholic Church? And I'm like, what about it? Do you think I defend what they did? Do you think I wouldn't have been one of those mothers do you think I would have let them do that if I knew about it? No. Like, wherever children are, wherever vulnerable people are, that's where predators go. It's an absurd argument to think that they're only on the far right or only in churches or wherever, like wherever there are children, that's where they go. And so this identity politics madness, this gaslighting, it's starting to fall apart because of the real harm that people are seeing. And I knew that would be the case in the beginning. I thought this is going to take 20 years. I remember when I started talking about it, I said to my husband, I said, I think this is going to take 20 years and we're going to really suffer for talking about it, but I don't care. We made a decision. My husband was not going to speak about it so that he could keep earning money. So look, it's only been 10 years, and I love that because that means parents love their children. They're willing to burn down any political party, any government that hurts their children. And deep down, I was like, that's what I had hoped, that parents were just like me and we had no loyalty above our kids.
Yeah, I think your point on parental rights and family sovereignty are so important because, one of the most insidious things about the trans ideology or the trans movement is that it essentially makes kids the moral property of the state. So you have schools are able to do things to your kids or treat your kids as the opposite sex without telling parents. So such a serious deprivation of the rights of parents over their children, the moral authority of parents over their children. It's incredibly serious. It's so important that you're raising the issue of child safeguarding in relation to all of this because it's such a central question. Okay, Moira, my last question for you is about, you say you thought it would take 20 years for this to change and you're kind of halfway through this battle. I think a lot of people probably feel like that. But I want to ask you about whether you think things have changed quite a lot over the past week, I guess, because a certain event has happened in the United States of America, which is that Donald Trump is back in power. His executive orders are extraordinary. He seems to be dismantling the entire ideology of the old ruling class bit by bit. And of course, one of his executive orders was titled Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. It really is an extraordinary executive order. Lots of people are saying it's just a turf manifesto because it just sums up the issue very well. What impact do you think that will have?
Oh, no, it has totally ripped off the mask of respectability that everybody was hiding. We're the legitimate centre, we're the big group. We're the professionals. We're the real, genuine leaders or something like that. And it's like, no. What that was cowardice, self-serving cowardice that put children, like you're using children as a human shield, as a political shield, which makes me sick. And they will not be able to continue to hide behind that. And I am loving it.
Moira, thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.